Are you looking to build influence? Or maybe to drive more traffic? But bottom line, you want to change the game. You've come to the right place. Welcome to the Business Building Book Club. We're going to give you the tools you need to succeed, both online and in person. Brought to you by Coach Molly and Three Pines Leadership.
Welcome back to the Business Building Book Club. I'm your host, Coach Molly from Three Pines Leadership, and thank you so much for taking this part of your day and spending it with me here at the book club. This season, we are diving into my favorite influence-based business book, which is Russell Brunson's Expert Secrets. It's the second book in his Secrets trilogy, and it's all about what we do when our customers start coming into our online environment, and how do we keep them there? What is it that's going to draw them to us and keep them there? And what we've learned is it's all about creating a movement. This episode, we're going to dive in to another one of the secrets. We're going to dive straight into secret number 2 today. But before we do, I want to remind you that you can touch base with me on a variety of different social platforms, including you can find me on Twitter at Coach Molly, and you can find me on Instagram at Three Pines Leadership. Let me know how you're implementing these strategies and tools that we're giving you here at the book club. What is it doing for your business? And let me know what's getting in the way. If you want to follow along with this season's Business Building Book Club, you can with your very own hardcover copy of Expert Secrets. And guess what? You can get it for free. That's right. All you have to do is pay for shipping. Russell's been so wonderful, and he's provided this book to us absolutely free. If we can just cover the cost it costs to get it to us. And you can get your copy at leadershipmade.com/expert-secrets. That's leadershipmade.com/expert-secrets. So let's dive into it. Secret number 2, which is page 48 in the new edition hardcover book. Secret number 2, teaching your frameworks. I was sitting in a small room of very high achievers with a few weeks after Dean Graziosi's new book launch for Millionaire Success Habits. This was an affiliate mastermind meeting for the people who had sold the most books during the launch. As I looked around, I could clearly see it included the who's who of the marketing and personal development industries. During the meeting, Dean looked over at Brendan Burchard, who was also sitting in the room, and asked him if he'd be willing to share his 7-day launch framework with everyone. Brendan agreed, grabbed a marker, and spent about 2 minutes doodling out some squares and boxes and arrows without saying a word. When he was done, he turned around, pointed to what he had drawn and said, "This is my 7-day launch framework." Then he told a story about how he came up with it and walked us through a quick overview of the process. Then he pointed to the first of his sketch and started teaching the tactics involved in executing that step. Then he moved to the next step, walked us through that step in the process, and so on. Everyone in the room was writing notes a mile a minute when someone asked Brendan a question. Brandon stopped, responded to the question, and looked back at his framework. "Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to throw you off," said the guy who asked the question. Brendan looked back at him and told him not to worry. He explained that because he was teaching from his framework, he had just to go back to where he had left off, and he was fine. And then he said something that has been burned into my mind since that day. He said, "Your framework is your savior." You see, your framework is a map that helps you know where you're going. If you ever get stuck or forget what's next, your framework has all the answers you need to save you and put you back on track. One of the other very powerful things about a framework is that you can take it and teach it as quickly or as methodically as you need to, depending on how much detail you put into each step of the framework. For instance, you could skim the surface in just 2 minutes on a YouTube video, or go deeper in 2 hours on a webinar, or dive really deep over 2 days at a workshop. I can and have made quick videos teaching my perfect webinar framework, and I've also taught it in more detail at a live 3-day event. It was the same framework in each case. As you'll also see in secret number 5, when we start talking about how to quickly create information products, your frameworks are also the key there. Your framework can be a post in Instagram, a video on YouTube, an episode on your podcast, a lead magnet, a chapter of your book, a course, a membership site, a coaching program, a mastermind group, or something else. You will use your framework over and over again as a tool that guides your dream customers to the results that they're looking for. But in this chapter, I'm not going to show you the different ways that you can package your frameworks. I'll save that for after we talk about new opportunities and creating offers. But here, I want to focus on my framework for teaching frameworks. Yes, I practice what I preach. This is one of the primary skills that you will need to learn as an expert if you want to be able to guide your dream customers to their desired results. So how to teach frameworks. One of the worst feelings in the world is standing on stage or in front of a group of people you've been called to serve and trying to explain to them a concept or a framework that you know will change their lives. But a few minutes into your explanation, you can see their eyes glazing over. I can't tell you how many times I've been in that situation and I wanted to stop, grab their shoulders, shake them, and yell, "You don't understand what I'm trying to tell you!" I know I had the key they were looking for, but I had no idea how to get them how to get them interested enough that they would even believe me. But I felt like I was called and that my message was important, so I kept trying. Most times I felt like I was shoving a round peg into a square hole. I was a wrestler, though, and I wasn't used to losing. So I just kept trying, knowing that if I took enough shots, eventually, I'll get a takedown. As time went on, I tried different ways of teaching my frameworks, hoping to get a different result. Some things worked, and I remembered to keep doing those, and other things didn't, and I made notes not to try them again. I also spent a lot of time at events watching how other speakers delivered their presentations, and I'd take notes on how certain things they did made me feel. And then I would try to add it into my presentations. Each time I stood in front of a group, it was another audition to test my message and see if I could make it click. Over the years, I got better and better and eventually developed my framework for teaching frameworks. That's what I call it. It's a 4-step system to make sure that what I say is impactful so that the people I'm serving will listen and remember what they learned. Let me walk you through how it works. First, you introduce the framework. Before I begin teaching the framework, I must first introduce it. So I do that by simply telling the audience the name of my framework. This is my hook story offer framework, or here's my perfect webinar framework. Then I give them my framework description. My insert number, step framework, or system or process, for insert result. So when I was doing the perfect webinar framework, I'd say, this is my 5-step framework for creating a webinar that sells any product to a cold audience in less than 90 minutes. Step number 1, share how you learned it or earned it. The big mistake that most people make as soon as they introduce their framework is that they want to jump straight into teaching the strategy and tactics. I made this mistake for years because I would get so excited to teach the concept that I had spent years learning and mastering that I knew would change people's lives. I had spent so much of my time creating this framework that I wanted to share that it felt like the most special gift I could possibly give. When I finally had an opportunity to share it, I give people the concept that was so sacred to me, only to see most of them brush it off as unimportant. Each time that happened, I would think of the scripture in the New Testament when Christ was teaching his Sermon on the Mount and said in Matthew 7:6, "Neither cast ye your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet." That's what I felt like. I had given them a pearl and they gave it back to me and walked away. I got so frustrated one day in front of a group after I gave them the pearl and no one seemed to care that I went off on a mini rant. Do you not understand what I just gave you? I asked the people at this small workshop. Let me tell you what I had to go through to earn this concept so that I could share it with you today. And then I spent about 15 minutes telling them the story about all the pain that I had to go through, the money I spent, the time I lost, the testing on myself as a human guinea pig, the tests I did with others to make sure the concept worked, and the iterations we had to go through to make this perfect. After telling them this story, I then re-explained to them the same pearl I had just shared minutes earlier, and this time they got it. The first time I had given them the pearl, and they didn't respect it. The second time, they were pre-framed and understood why it was so important. Handing them a pearl through this lens changed everything. Getting it to now meant they saved themselves the pain and suffering I had to go through to get it for them. Now they understood the value of what they were receiving. The first thing I do after I introduce the framework is explain how I either learned it, your knowledge, or earned it through your experience. You've probably noticed in each chapter of this book, and in all of my books, and every presentation, podcast episode, blog post, or video I make, that I always start by telling the story of how I earned or learned it. This pre-frame creates the value of what I'm sharing. Without it, the strategy and tactics I share become worthless. During this part of the process, you should acknowledge the giants that you learn. You should also acknowledge the giants that you learned any piece of your framework from. You spent time learning and studying from others to build your framework. You've interviewed countless people. Whenever you share something that you learned from someone else, give them credit. Many people think that sharing the source of their knowledge somehow diminishes their status in minds of the people listening, but the opposite is true. I try to always give credit to the person I learned anything from before I share it. Doing this has helped me keep great relationships with the people I learned from when I got started. It helped me serve them back in a small way after they were so gracious with helping me on my journey. Your audience will respect you more because Your audience will respect you more because you didn't steal ideas from others. Step 2. Share the strategy or the what that you do. The next thing I do is share the strategy for the framework. Many people get confused on the difference between strategy and tactics, but for this process, it's really important that you understand the difference. The Farnham Street blog explained the difference between strategy and tactics like this. Strategy is an overarching plan or a set of goals. Changing strategies is like trying to turn around an aircraft carrier. It can be done, but not quickly. Tactics are the specific actions or steps you undertake to accomplish your strategy. For example, in a war, a nation's strategy might be to win the hearts and minds of the opponent's civilian population. To achieve this, they could use tactics such as radio broadcasts or building hospitals. A personal strategy might be to get into a particular career, whereas your tactics might include choosing your educational path, seeking out a helpful mentor, or distinguishing yourself from the competition. During this part of my teaching, I give them the outline of the framework, which is similar to sharing the table of contents of a book, as it's the strategy of where we are and where we're going. For most people, this is simply an outline, and that's okay. This is what most of my outlines for my perfect webinar framework might look like. The perfect webinar. Step 1, grab their attention and quickly build rapport. Step 2, tell your origin story about how you earned or learned your new opportunity. Step 3 is to break and rebuild their false belief patterns with the 3 core stories: vehicle, internal, and external. Step 4 is to use the stack to position the offer correctly. And step 5 is to finish with closing techniques to increase close rates. If you're more of a visual person, you could doodle it out like I do in my books when I teach most of my frameworks, but this is not essential. After I've presented the framework, I move on to the next 5 steps. You'll notice that in most of the chapters of this book, towards the beginning, you'll you'll see that a doodle and some steps showing you the strategy, and then the content inside that outline. Inside that outline is the tactical or the how-to plan to execute each step of the strategy. Step 3, teach the tactics or the how you do it. This is where most of the content is actually taught. What are the principles and tools that you've learned, and how can people use them in their lives? Walk them through the step-by-step process, just like you were teaching yourself back when you got started. In our 30-day summit, we posed the question. You suddenly lose all of your money, along with your name and reputation, and you only have your marketing know-how left. You have bills piled high and people harassing you for money over the phone, plus you have a guaranteed roof over your head, a phone line, an internet connection, and a ClickFunnels account for only 1 month. You no longer have your big guru name, your following, or your joint venture partners. Other than your vast marketing experience, you're an unknown newbie. What would you do from day 1 to day 30 to save yourself? I love looking at my tactical teaching through the lens of a question like that. You should ask yourself these questions. If I were to suddenly lose the results that I've achieved that others are coming to me to learn about, and I only had my framework left and I was starting over with no advantages, what would I do from day 1 to day 30 to get the big result back? This question will help you teach the principles of your framework in a simple process that will actually be possible for someone who is starting from ground zero to follow. Depending on the length of time you have to teach, you may use parts of the same framework to teach frameworks inside each step of your framework. For example, when you teach the first step of the strategy, you can include step 1, where you share how you learned or earned that step to create more value when you teach it, and then also include step 4, where you show a case study of how it worked for someone else. Sometimes one of the steps of your framework will be another framework, just like this chapter of the book is a framework within the framework of the entire Expert Secrets book. When that's the case, you may share steps 1, 2, 3, and 4 multiple times within the one step of your framework. I know that may sound overwhelming, but when you look at the table of contents of this book, you can see how section 1, creating your movement, is a framework. And there are 3 steps and strategy of that framework. Step 1 is to becoming an expert. Step 2, creating a new opportunity. Step 3, giving your people a future-based cause. But then inside of that framework, I have already shown you the framework for finding your voice. And now you're going through teaching your frameworks. These are just embedded frameworks inside of my core framework that I can go to when time allows. That's how you're able to create a simple framework and teach it in a 2-minute YouTube video, which would be level 1, a 2-hour webinar, which would be level 2, or a 2-day live event, which would be level 3. You're still teaching the same framework, but you're able to go deeper into the embedded frameworks when you have more time. Step 4, show them how it works for others. In step 1, you tell them the story about how you learned or earned the framework so that they've seen how it worked for you. The last step is to show that it not only works for other people, but that you have the ability to transfer this framework to others. This is a big reason why it's so important not to miss the step inside the Finding Your Voice framework of becoming the servant. The more time you spend testing your frameworks out on other people, the better. One reason is because it always takes some adjustment to get your process to work for others. You have life experiences and talents that others don't have that do give you an unfair advantage. By getting your process to work for others, you lose those unfair advantages and you have to adjust your process to make up for those shortcomings. The other reason is that people are always skeptical of the expert. Even if they believe you, they will think it's because you have some type of special abilities that they don't have, so they'll dismiss your ability to help them. Showing them that it didn't just work for you, but it also worked for people just like them is the key to getting them to believe your framework. from the first time you start applying your framework to others, and every day after you start sharing these frameworks, you need to be gathering these stories, case studies, testimonials, examples, and proof that your framework can get results for the people you are serving. Now that you've spent time focusing on developing you as an expert and the proprietary frameworks that you are going to be bringing to the market, I want to shift your focus to the marketplace and how to position yourself inside of it so you can attract the dream customers you've been called to serve. So I'm going to close the book on this chapter of Expert Secrets. Remember, you can get your own copy for free. You just have to pay for shipping at leadershipmade.com/expert-secrets. That's leadershipmade.com/expert-secrets to get your copy so you can follow along. And the bonus that you're not getting here when you're listening on the podcast or you're watching on video on the Three Pines Leadership YouTube channel is that Russell has packed his books full of easy to follow little doodles that, once explained, are fantastic quick triggers to really quickly bring to mind what these frameworks are so that we can quickly implement them in our businesses. There are so many of them. It's absolutely worth it. Pick up your copy, leadershipmade.com/expert-secrets. Pick up a copy, follow along with us. But make sure you subscribe to the Business Building Book Club, because here we not only give you the book, but we jump into conversations about them. So every time we read out a chapter, our next episode is going to be a conversation about it. So tune in next episode for a deeper dive into teaching frameworks. Until then, my friends, remember, I love you and be excellent.